So it's 1 o'clock. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Better Spaces is a health and happiness solution for today's hybrid workplace. My name is Dr. Paul Kachowa. I'm the owner and physical therapist of PAR5 Physical Therapy here in Randolph, New Jersey. And today's session is functional fitness, training for real life movement. Okay, we're going to explore the concepts of functional fitness, what it is, and its importance and connection to daily life. We'll discuss how to train, so hopefully you've got some shorts on and sneakers on. We're going to train for real life movements, improving strength and mobility for activities that you encounter in your daily life or your sport or your exercise routine. So we'll feature practical exercises today that really connect function and strength so that you could stay fit and for all activities that matter to you most as you age. A little bit about me. I received my doctorate in physical therapy in 2010, and I've been in the PT field for over 25 years. I'm a certified orthopedic clinical specialist, certified golf medical professional, golf fitness instructor, certified CrossFit level 1 coach, certified dry needling specialist, and certified functional movement technique specialist. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today, hopefully, it will be helpful and useful for you, but feel free to use the chat box if you want to cover anything specific or if you have any questions. So let me pull up my slides here. Here we go. So functional training or functional fitness training for real life movement. And again, because I'm a medical professional physical therapist, I have to put up this slide as a disclaimer that the information that we're going to be going over today is going to be general and aimed at a broad population. So if you're dealing with something specific, make sure that you get a thorough physical exam from a medical professional, because this is just general advice. It's not medical advice. It's not physical therapy. Alrighty. So now when we go through these exercises, the important thing too is that pain is not part of the physical therapy or exercise experience. A lot of times people will tell me that, hey, no pain, no gain, or I need to do this and then get my results or get my efforts to pay off. But really, there's a lot of different ways that we can scale and modify exercises so that we target the right joint, the right muscle, and have the correct amount of dosage to make a change, to make a increased range of motion, flexibility, increased strength, etc. It shouldn't be painful, because if pain comes into the equation, it changes how your body moves, how your body functions. You know, our body really knows movement. It doesn't know muscle. When you go pick something up or move a weight, your body just knows, hey, I got to lift that weight, I got to accomplish that task, and it will work in the most energy efficient path possible, the path of least resistance. So if you're weak or tight in a certain area, it's going to work around that and compensate for many, many years. And then that compensation will work fine for you until it doesn't, until it stops, until an injury or an ache or a pain prompts you to say, hey, I got to get this looked at. I have to have this fixed. All right. So one of the big things I tell people every time they come to one of my classes is that if you take away one thing, take away this, that the body functions on this alternating pattern of stability and mobility. If this pattern is disrupted, then pain or injury is the result. So if you're dealing with something like, say, back pain, the back is one of the stable parts. It's supposed to be a stable segment, but joints or segments above that, like the T-spine, the thoracic spine, or the hip, which are below the lower back, they need to be mobile. And if we just treat the back because it's painful, and the pain usually comes back because we need to address everything in this pattern here, making sure that above and below, they're doing their thing. Because if your hips are tight, your body will compensate around that tightness and try and make your lower back unstable or more mobile. And then that reverses its role, and that can kind of mess things up the chain. So we want to make sure that when you get this, when you're dealing with anything and you want to have it fixed, make sure that they cover everything up and down the chain here so that you can get to the root cause of the problem. All right. When it comes to functional fitness, it's important for everyday life to be durable, to be resilient, right? And to maintain your body as we age so that we can fulfill our role in society, our family, and enjoy our last decade of life, right? So it's about strength and mobility because there are certain changes. I covered this in other classes, certain changes that happen in our body over time as we age that prevents us from doing things the way that we used to do it when we were in our 20s or our teens. Our bodies will start to lose the ability to stay hydrated. The tissues become more dehydrated, become more brittle, less loose, less supple, and then we lose strength as well. And bones become less strong and they become weaker because we're not adapting or loading our body the way that we should be. And everyday life, if you think about it as these things, like we're always lifting or pushing or pulling or carrying something, right? If it's our body, we're going to be carrying that from point A to point B, just moving our own body, or lifting the groceries, or our grandkids, or the laundry, lifting and pulling, right? And it's all about integration, right? Trying to integrate all those segments in our body into an exercise versus if we go to a gym and we do an exercise routine that we're moving only one joint. That's isolation or isolated. Like if I'm going to do a bicep curl, I'm just bending like this, because I want to make my arms stronger. But really, as we look at this motion, I'm just bending one joint. But daily living, I mean, like how many times do we pick something up like this? I don't curl weight and try and carry the laundry like this. It's more like integrating and using our wrists, our elbows, our shoulders, our back. So integration over isolation, because that's how life is functionally. So it's important to go over exercises that are multi-joint, compound movements, and are varied, all right? So this dosage of variability where you're doing one exercise one day and then the next day doing something completely different, that is more important to create some type of change in our body, because life, day-to-day activities are not always the same, right? So encountering things that we have to do at everyday work or life or shopping, there's a lot of different variability. So our exercise routine should not be routine, right? Routine is the enemy, and it doesn't create any change if we're doing the same thing over and over again. So workouts should fall into these categories, and your exercises actually should fall into these categories. We have the push, the pull, the hinge, the squat, carry, and rotate. So these categories here, your workout should kind of mix and match through these categories. The hinge is a movement that is very hip dominant. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then the squat, it's very a knee dominant motion, but squats are important. I once had a client come in to see me that had knee pain, and she said she went to her orthopedic surgeon, and she's like, I have bone on bone, and he said that I should never squat again. It's hard, it's bad for my knees. Well, I told her that I don't agree, because you should squat, even if you are bone on bone, because if you lose the ability to get up off the toilet or sit down and get up out of a chair or get up out of the couch, that's a change in it impacts your daily activities, your living, right? So squatting, if we really boil it down, is the ability to get up off the toilet, get up off out of a chair, get up out of a couch. So if a physician says, hey, don't squat anymore because you're going to ruin your knees, I think that's bad advice, because squatting inherently is okay because it's functional. These are things that we do every day. Bad squatting technique and bad lifting techniques, that is what causes excess joint strain, joint wear and tear. So we have to move well first and then move often. We prioritize the mechanics of the movements, build consistency, and then build intensity. Don't go jumping into a weight routine if you cannot move well with your own body, then add weight over top of that, okay? So the dosage and how much we do of each of these categories really depends on your goals and what your sport is, what your everyday activity is, and what's your goal. So it's really an art in terms of programming what type of exercises through these categories. So this is different. Oftentimes people come and I ask them about their workout routine, and they'll usually do like a body split day, like, oh, I do back and bis on one day, chest and triceps on one day, and I'll do legs and cardio the next day. So that routine is very classic. It's a bodybuilding type of programming workout, and that's fine if your goal is to look good on stage. All right, if you are a bodybuilder and you're going to flex and you need to isolate movements, isolate peak muscle contraction and shape, then and symmetry, then fine. You could split your workout like that and also work on a lot of isolation type movements. But most of us are not bodybuilders, and the way that our muscles in terms of symmetry and the way they look are less of a priority than just maintaining strength and durability as we age, right? So the first thing that we want to go over is this hinge or squat. So a hinge is a movement where we pick something up off the floor, like a deadlift, and then the squat can be a very knee dominant, where we're working on just squatting down and lunging, very athletic type of movements, and we need to make sure that we have good ankle mobility for that. So I'm going to pull up my two-shot here, and we're just going to talk about a couple exercises, a couple movements. So the hip hinge, first one. When we look at the hip hinge from the side view, we have our feet about shoulder or hip width apart, right? And we don't want to have too much of a turnout. If I'm looking at you here, I don't want to have my feet kind of turned out like this. I want to make sure that they're relatively straight. They can be turned out about maybe 10 to 15 degrees. But anyway, the hip hinge is hip dominant. My back spine stays straight, and then I hinge my butt backwards. And I make this shape with my body where my trunk is tilted forward, my head and shoulders are way out over my toes, my hips are back, and my feet are flat. My knees have not gone forward. So that's the key differentiator between hip hinge movements and squat movements. So the hip hinge is coming down like this, maybe picking something up off the floor. You could see I'm bending a lot in my hip and then coming up. So doing a couple of these. If we were going to do this with some dumbbells, I've got two dumbbells here. I'm just going to hold them by my side, show you from the front view. Again, hip width apart with my feet, and I'm going to hinge and then come back up. My knees don't travel forward. They don't travel inward. My hips go back. All right. My spine stays straight. A lot of times people will go here and they'll round out the back to get down because they are limited with how much they could bend at their hips. So to get down, they're like, oh, I'm just going to go down like this. And that creates a lot of back issues. So picking something up off the ground, we really need to, again, work on mechanics where we are driving from the hips. Hips go forward, hips go back. The other motion is the squat. And the squat, again, is very knee dominant. My feet are going to be slightly wider, hip width, shoulder width apart, and my knees bend. They track in the same direction as my feet, and then I stand up. There's a lot of knee bending with a squat. From the front view, I've got shoulder width apart. My feet will be turned out a little bit, but not more than 10 to 15 degrees. My hands are out. That way, as my hips go down and back, I can maintain balance in this position. And then I go down and back. And it depends on what type of range of motion you have at your ankle that allows you to go to a depth that makes sense. I have a bench here. So your squat may just be to the bench and then standing up. So sit to stand is usually what I will start people on if they are unfamiliar or weak with the squat. I'll just work on that sit to stand. And if we included a weight, we would hold a weight maybe up by the chest, elbows bent, and then we repeat the same motion. Shoulder width apart with the feet stance, hips go down and back, the knees bend, and then you come up. So these are two motions, hip hinge with the deadlift, or the squat, which is a knee dominant motion. So the difference again, here's our squat, and here's our hip hinge. More hip, and then more knee. And we can kind of divide those and then kind of see if we do this unilaterally, Then there's other variations like this RDL, Romanian single-legged deadlift, where there's a hip hinge on one leg, or the lunge, where I'm bending through one leg, like a single-legged squat. So these are functional motions for the lower extremity, all right? So let's pull up the slides again. So we did hip hinge and squatting, and now we've got push and pull, right? So these are very simple. Push or pull can also be in a horizontal plane or a vertical plane where we're pushing and pulling. So horizontal planes are something like a chest press or a push-up, or if they're pulling, then it's a seated row where we're pulling backwards against a band or some type of resistance. Overhead press would be a shoulder press, vertical, or a lat pull down or a pull up would be a vertical pull. Okay, so push and pull, generally horizontal or vertical. And again, you could break that up like we did with the hip hinge and the squat to single arm or single leg, right? And then compound combinations. Compound combinations are taking both of these push-pull movements and including them into the squat. So then we get a lot of things happening at once. I'm going to pull up my two shot here. So one of the exercises that are very complex, where we integrate the squat mechanic and a vertical press, is called a thruster. So we will take the dumbbells. You could do this with one, or you could do it with two. We take the dumbbells and we load them up in front of the shoulders. I'm resting the dumbbell, the head of the dumbbell on my shoulders, and my elbows are up to support the weight. They're not down like this. So I'm up here. And then we're going to combine a squat with an overhead press. Okay, so again, we talked about stance with our feet hip width apart. I squat down, and then as I stand up, I press, and then repeat. Squat, and then press. I use the momentum of my movement in the vertical plane to drive the weights up. Okay, so that's the thruster. The other combination that we could use incorporates a pull with a deadlift. So you think about the thruster, like when did we do that? If we had to put something in an overhead bin on an airplane, or put something up on a high shelf, if it's heavy, I'm not going to use my arms. It's more functional and you're more powerful and you're safer when you're using your legs to drive something overhead. So if we take the thruster and apply that to everyday life, it's any time that we're putting a weight over top of us. Now, the other compound movement is going to be a row, a horizontal pull with the deadlift. We demonstrated the deadlift before. We're going to take the same weights. So I'm going to go hip width, so it's a little bit more narrow, hinging from the waist. Here's my deadlift, and then I'm going to do a row, which is basically a horizontal pull. And I stand up, bend over, hip hinge, row, stand up. Hip hinge, row, stand up. From the front, again, knees do not go inward. They just stay over the ankles, pull horizontally, and then come up. All right, so horizontal row is basically this motion here. But because my trunk is horizontal, I'm bent over, that horizontal row looks vertical. All right, so that's just a frame of reference. So it's always pulling backwards. That's that horizontal pull. And then we just incorporated that with our hinge, our hip hinge. And that's very functional. Anytime that you're going to go pick something up off the ground and carry it, you want to have a strong back. You want to have a good pull, good lats, good shoulders, upper back, and strong glutes. All righty. And then let's move on to carry variations. So carry variations, that was one of the things. We have different ways, and when we're carrying weights, basically we pick them up, prioritize and optimize our posture, our breathing, our core activation, and then we walk, okay? So what does that look like? That looks like, I've got the dumbbells again. As you deadlift them off the floor, there's different variations of this. So a farmer's carry would just be standing like this, having the optimized posture, shoulder blades back, head up nice and tall, abdominals on, and you're just going to walk. As you're walking, we want to maintain good posture and not do any side bending and being as still as possible with the arms. This is a farmer's carry. There's also a suitcase carry where I hold that weight, and these can be much heavier than what you can generally lift off the ground or push over your head because you're not really moving the weight, you're just holding it. So with the offset suitcase carry, that load has a tendency to pull your arm or pull your body sideways. So as you're stepping, you want to create some tension in this other arm, shoulder blades back and down, core engaged, and walk as still and as straight as possible. And because this weight is pulling me off center, I have to fight with my abdominals on one side to maintain that position. Okay? And then we also have odd objects for carrying, right? I have a medicine ball here, and we could incorporate a lot of these other movements that we talked about, the hip hinge, right? I'm picking this up off the floor. I'm carrying it like this. Carrying it low and walking around like this is very difficult because one, the weight will sit on your abdominal area, your belly, and it makes it hard to breathe, especially if this was heavy. So what I usually have people do when they're doing an odd object carry is to go a little bit higher and give yourself this bear hug to this weight. So here, we could still breathe through our belly, create some good stability through our shoulders, and practice carrying objects over long distances without a handle. And that's important too, because functionally, not everything comes with a handle. You know, children, as you pick them up, they don't have handles. So, you know, odd objects like a rice sack or, you know, a big bag of salt or, you know, stuff like that usually doesn't have a handle. We want to be able to pick that up off the ground and remain strong. All right, the next one, let me see here, is rotations. And then rotation also targets your abdominal area. And it really depends on, again, dosage should be applicable to your daily activities and your sport. Okay, it's very sport specific. The one exercise that I like to build on rotary stability is called a Palloff press. So that looks like this. We attach a band, or you could use a weight, cable, column, whatever, and you attach it to, if I'm standing, about chest height. And you can do this type of exercise in any position. You could do it in a kneeling position, half kneeling, sitting, but for today, I'm going to show you in standing. So in standing, we want to keep our body facing 90 degrees where this thing is attached. And I'm going to hold this with both hands right on my chest. I, you know, adjust my position to create tension because this is a band. The farther I am, the more intense this exercise is going to be, the more resistance I'll feel. So we get ourselves set. Feet totally straight, knees straight, hips, glutes engaged. My hips are underneath me. My trunk is straight. My abdominals are on. My shoulders are back and down. And then from here, very simply, I take my hands, both of them, and I push them out 90 degrees from my body. And I hold this position. It's like a vertical standing plank. Planks, like when you're on the ground on your hands and knees and kind of holding one position, you should feel the abdominals turn on, and then you can kind of come back from this position and come back to the rest position. So I'll show you hopefully from the front view. It's basically 90 degrees. This band will want to pull me sideways. It wants to rotate. My body wants to do that. I want to fight that using my abdominals. So I hold this position. This is a Palloff hold. And I'm just working the abdominals and breathing through that. If we need to be more specific with our sport, then maybe if our sport is more of a horizontal rotary component, I can go a little bit more athletic and then work on horizontal rotations with that, with my hands away, using my abdominals. So that's another example of just, it could be super varied and applicable to any sport, depending upon your needs, right? So really you want to make sure that your exercise routine is as applicable to you, what you need throughout your daily life. All righty, so let's see here. I think that is it. Yep. So again, if you have any questions, you know, feel free, use the chat box here and ask them. I want to make this session and all my sessions as helpful and informative as possible. if you want me to cover something specific in future sessions, go ahead and you can reach out to me via my email here or team@betterspaces.com. All right. So if there's no questions, thank you everyone for joining me today. You could look for this session and many more on demand on any of the Better Spaces apps. So I'll be back in probably 2 weeks here on Tuesday, March 19th at 1 p.m. We're going to do resilient back exercises for a healthy spine. Okay. We're going to join that. We're going to talk about back health, explore the common causes of back pain, and introduce exercises to promote a strong and resilient spine, and incorporate these exercises into your routine to reduce the risk of back issues and improve overall spinal health. Oh, there's a question. So fast weightlifting or slow weightlifting? All right, so that's a great question. You know, are you going to lift these weights fast or slow? Most of the time, people starting off and working out in a functional workout routine, we want to prioritize mechanics, right? Mechanics move slowly, so you work on your mechanics. Once your mechanics are good, you want to be consistent over how many number of reps that we do, and then add in the intensity. So that intensity component can be increased weight or speed. So if we do any of these exercises and we move fast, then that becomes more plyometric and more sport specific, where you're working on power. But if you're working fast, you want to make sure that you prioritize, maintain your mechanics, and then your consistency, and then your intensity. If your mechanics fall apart, when you add intensity, then you take it out. You move slower. Prioritize mechanics over consistency over intensity. Hopefully that answered your question. All righty. Awesome, awesome. So again, any questions, you could always reach out to me, paul@par5pt.com, or team@betterspaces.com. All right, thank you for coming, and be well.